The wind howled over the Wyoming plains like a wounded animal, carrying with it the scent of dust, sweat, and desperation. Jeremiah Kane stepped off his wagon, boots crunching in the packed dirt of the frontier town square. The sun hung low behind a veil of grit, turning the sky a grim bronze. Jeremiah tugged his hat lower, eyes scanning the crowd gathered beneath a crooked banner that read, "Goods and Livestock Auction Today." It was a lie in part. Some of the goods had names, and some still had breath. He wasn't here to buy. He'd come to trade cattle for winter salt and wire for the fences that had fallen during spring floods. His ranch, tucked far into the high country, was barely clinging to life. Much like him. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered but thinned out since last winter, with a beard he hadn't trimmed in weeks. Beneath his coat hung a colt he hadn't drawn in months. His eyes, once steady and warm, were now glassy with ghosts. Ghosts of the wife he'd buried 2 winters past beneath a spruce tree that still bled sap. Of the child who'd never taken a breath. The crowd shifted, a murmur running through it like dry wheat under wind. On the ramshackle wooden platform, a heavy-set man stumbled forward, dragging a girl behind him by her elbow. She tripped and caught herself, hand on her rounded belly. Her dress was dirt-smeared muslin, torn at the hem. She couldn't have been more than 20. The man wiped his mouth and shouted, "This here's Clara Darnell. My late wife's girl. Got knocked up by some fool and now I got no use for her. She eats like 2 and works like half." Jeremiah stopped walking. Clara's eyes darted across the faces in the crowd, but found no kindness. Only curiosity. Cold, cruel, silent. "She can cook, clean, might birth you a fine strong boy if she don't die doing it. What am I bid?" The silence was choking. Then a man laughed. $2. "She's got too much belly for me." "3, called another, drunk and swaying. Jeremiah looked away. His chest clenched. Somewhere beneath his coat, tucked in a worn satchel, was a lace ribbon once tied to his wife's braid. He hadn't touched it in months. Clara's face changed. It wasn't pleading, not anymore. It was resignation. Shoulders stiffened, jaw set. The kind of resolve that came from knowing no one was coming. The bidding stalled at $5. The stepfather spat. "Come on, this is a 2-for-1. Girl and baby." No one wanted damaged goods. The auctioneer moved to dismiss her. "No sale." And then Jeremiah heard his own voice, rough and unfamiliar. $7. And a gun. Heads turned. The crowd hushed. The stepfather squinted. "What kind of gun?" Jeremiah reached inside his coat and held up an old iron revolver. "She worth that to you?" The man grinned like a wolf. "Deal." The exchange was quick. Money handed over. The gun gone. Clara led off the stage like a broken mule. She tried to pull her arm away when he reached for her, but he stepped back, offering distance. "You're free to walk," he said, voice quiet. "Ain't nobody chasing you down." She didn't move. Her eyes narrowed, suspicious. "Why'd you do it?" she asked. Jeremiah didn't answer right away. The wind kicked up again, swirling grit between them. Finally, he said, "You reminded me of someone. That's all." She took a half-step toward his wagon, then stopped. "I ain't no one's charity." "You're not," he replied. "You're a person. That's more than they treated you." Still watching him, she climbed up into the seat. She didn't thank him. He didn't expect her to. The wagon rolled out of the square as the last light bled into the hills. Behind them, the crowd dispersed, already forgetting the girl with the belly and the quiet man with the haunted eyes. They didn't speak for the first hour. Jeremiah kept his eyes on the trail, the reins loose in his callous hands. Clara sat stiff beside him, arms crossed protectively over her stomach. As the stars emerged, he pulled off the road near a copse of dead aspens. "We'll camp here." She didn't move until he unhooked the horses. He spread a blanket near the fire pit, handed her a piece of dried meat and hard bread. "I can feed myself," she snapped, taking it. He nodded. "Name's Jeremiah Kane." "I didn't ask?" "No." But now you know. She chewed slowly, eyes flicking to the woods beyond the fire. Every crackle made her tense. She'd been scared before. Now she was something else, waiting, calculating, always ready to run. I ain't gonna touch you, he said without looking up from the kindling. I didn't think you'd need to say it if it were true. He sighed and stoked the flame. Fair enough. That night, she slept with one eye open. He saw her shift under the blanket he'd offered, shoulders to the wind. At dawn, they rode again. The sky was overcast, and the trail narrowed as they passed through pine groves and rock-cut ridges. He told her about the land, how the soil turned to shale just north of Devil's Finger Ridge, how wildcats came down in spring to drink from the river. She never responded. But she listened. By midday, they stopped by a creek. She tried to draw water, but nearly slipped on a wet stone. He caught her arm. Careful. She jerked away. I ain't fragile. I didn't say you were. She sat on a boulder, one hand on her back. Sweat streaked her brow. Her breath came shallow. You all right? She looked away. He used to say pain's what a woman's made for. Jeremiah's jaw tightened. That ain't true. She met his gaze. For the first time, she looked not angry, but exhausted. Worn beyond her years. You don't know what is, she said. You're right. Later, when they passed an abandoned shack, Jeremiah slowed. Bullet holes riddled the door. Burn marks climbed up one side. He didn't stop, and neither did Clara ask. They reached a ridge by dusk, overlooking the wide sweep of land where his ranch sat. From this distance, the cabin was a shadow. Fences broken. Chimney leaning. But it was home. He stopped the wagon. That's where we're headed. Still some work to do. She looked out over the land. Then back at him. What am I to you? She asked. Jeremiah took a long breath. You ain't property. You ain't debt. I didn't bring you for what was done to you. I brought you because I couldn't leave you there. You could have. I couldn't live with it. She turned her face back to the hills. I don't forgive you yet. You understand? I do. There was quiet again. Not hostile, simply unsure. As they descended the hill, the last light caught on the outline of the broken house. Jeremiah felt the old ache stir. But beside him, in the worn wagon seat, was a different kind of burden. One that breathed. One that, perhaps, might save him just as much as he had tried to save her. And so the wagon rolled on. Not toward the past. Not toward redemption. Just forward, into whatever came next. The cabin was smaller than Clara expected. Sagging roof, door hanging crooked, a single window that looked out on nothing but wind-bent grass. The chimney was cracked, the fence half down. It didn't look like salvation, but it didn't look like the auction block either. Jeremiah parked the wagon with quiet hands. It's not much, he said. But it's what I got. Clara climbed down slowly. Her body ached. The road had pressed into her bones. But she hadn't complained, not once, not aloud. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. A storm was brooding in the west, curling dark clouds low over the mountain ridges. Somewhere behind the horizon, the sun was fighting to be seen. She followed him to the door. He hesitated before opening it, like he was remembering something. Then he pushed inside. The room was dark, smelled faintly of ash and old wood. Dust caught in the golden shaft of light from the window. A pair of chairs, one cracked. A table with knife marks and a faded rag doll propped in the corner. Clara's eyes lingered on the doll. He saw. It was hers. My wife's. From when she was little. She put it there the day we moved in. Said it made the place feel safe. Clara didn't reply. She walked the space slowly, one hand on her belly, touching the rough surfaces, the quiet corners. Do you want the bed? He asked. She looked at him like he'd asked something absurd. It's your house. You're carrying life. You need rest. She considered it. Then nodded once. For tonight. He moved to the fireplace, stirred the ashes, began building a new flame. He moved like a man used to silence. Like the wind had been his only company for far too long. When the fire was burning, he brought in jerky and dried apples from the wagon. They ate without words. Outside, the wind picked up, sweeping through the trees in long sighs. That night, she slept on the bed. Jeremiah rolled out a blanket by the hearth. Either of them dreamed. Or if they did, they kept it to themselves. The days that followed weren't easy. The land was stubborn and wild, the chores relentless. The fences needed mending, the chimney reinforcing, the stream diverted from a fallen tree that had slowed its flow. Clara didn't sit idle. She took to the small kitchen, cleaning out old cans, scrubbing the counters, gathering dried herbs she found in a basket under the stairs. She boiled water, peeled potatoes, cleaned old jars. Her hands found rhythm, her breath steadied. Jeremiah worked from dawn to dark. He didn't ask for help, but she gave it anyway. She followed him to the pasture and held wire while he hammered posts. He showed her how to stack kindling in the dry shed. In return, she told him how to make broth with salted meat and crushed cloves. Still, they barely spoke beyond necessity. But trust didn't need words. It needed time. And time they had. One afternoon, as the sky split with sudden thunder, they raced to bring in the livestock. The rain came fast and heavy, drenching them in seconds. Clara slipped once, nearly falling, and he caught her by the waist. "You all right?" She stared at him, water dripping from her brow. "You're always a skin that." He smiled faintly. "You never answer." She leaned away from his grip. "That's 'cause I'm not sure." Inside, soaked and shivering, she peeled off her wet shawl. He looked away as she wrung out the fabric, cheeks coloring. "I was 16 when my mama died," she said suddenly. Jeremiah looked up. "I'm sorry." "She died slow. Fever. My stepfather, he drank more than he prayed. Started looking at me like I was meat left out too long." He didn't speak, but his hand curled into a fist on his knee. "One day he said he'd sell me if I didn't obey. I ran. Came back weeks later pregnant. The man who gave me this," she touched her belly, "was gone by then. Maybe killed in a skirmish out east. Maybe run off. I never knew." Jeremiah watched the firelight flicker on her face. "You ever think of leaving?" "I thought about dying more." Silence stretched between them. Then he said, "My wife's name was Eliza. She died giving birth. Our son never drew breath. I buried them both out back, under the pine with the bent limb." Clara looked down at her hands. "You still talk to her?" "Every day." A crack of thunder rolled overhead. That night, he didn't sleep on the floor. He stayed by the fire, carving a bit of wood with a small blade, eyes watching the orange glow. The next morning, the storm had passed, but something had shifted. They began to move with a quiet harmony. He'd wake and find the kettle already hot. She'd come in from the coop and find the firewood stacked neat by the hearth. She smiled once, just a flicker, when he slipped and cursed as he fell into the mud. He grinned back, chest warm despite the chill in the air. One evening, while patching a broken fence, Jeremiah spotted movement on the ridge. 2 men on horseback. Strangers. Watching. He returned to the cabin with tension in his spine. "Get inside," he told her. "Lock the door." She obeyed without question. That night, he loaded the rifle. She didn't ask why. She already knew. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked. "I think they're curious. Might be more than that. Will you fight them?" "If I have to." She nodded. "Then I'll fight too. You're pregnant. I ain't useless." The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. The woods seemed to lean in, listening. Even the birds kept their distance. They started sleeping in shifts. One by the window, one by the fire. He taught her how to load a pistol, how to aim for the chest, not the head. She was a quick learner. And then, one night they came. 3 riders. No lanterns. No words. Jeremiah heard the hoofbeats first. He was already up, rifle in hand. Clara stood behind him, breath calm, eyes hard. They waited. A knock on the door. Then another. "Jeremiah Kane," came a voice. Slurred. Familiar. He opened the door halfway, gun raised. It was Clara's stepfather. "Where's my girl?" the man sneered. "You bought her, but I'm here to collect interest." Behind him stood two others, rifles slung over their backs. Jeremiah didn't lower his weapon. "She's not yours anymore." The stepfather laughed. "Boy, you don't understand what I'm owed." Jeremiah's voice was steel. "You're owed nothing." A beat passed. Then Clara stepped forward. Past Jeremiah? Eyes on the man who'd sold her like cattle. "You can't own what you threw away," she said. "You sold your soul for a bottle." The man took a step forward, but Jeremiah cocked the rifle. "You take one more breath toward her," he said, "and I'll put you under the dirt next to the mule you rode in on." The riders looked between each other. One spit in the dirt. Another turned his horse. Clara's stepfather lingered a moment longer, then backed away. They left without another word. Jeremiah shut the door. Clara turned to him, her breath shaky. "I didn't think he'd ever stop haunting me." "He won't," Jeremiah said. "But now he knows you ain't afraid." She sat down slowly. He knelt beside her, hands rough but gentle. "I didn't buy you to save you," he said. "I bought you because you were the only thing in that town worth saving." She closed her eyes, leaned her head against his shoulder. The fire crackled. The storm had passed, but the world was still full of shadows. Still, for the first time in years, both of them began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the darkness wouldn't win. The days that followed were brighter, but not easier. The ground thawed early that spring, and Clara rose before the light each morning, her belly heavier with each passing week. She moved slower now, but with purpose. Jeremiah noticed how she ran her hands over the banister like it was sacred, how she hummed to the unborn child when she thought he wasn't listening. There was gentleness in her, yes, but something harder underneath. Steel forged by fire. They spoke more often now. Of little things. The weather. What to plant in the spring. Whether the wolves were moving closer. Sometimes he told her stories, brief, half-shaped memories of Eliza and the laughter that once filled the cabin's cracks. Clara listened, never interrupting, but he saw the way her eyes softened each time he let the past slip through. He was changing too. The silence that once wrapped around him like a shroud had loosened. Clara had become part of the rhythm. Not a guest anymore. Not a burden. Just there, like breath, like heartbeat. One morning, Jeremiah returned from the stream with his trousers soaked and boots muddied. Clara met him at the door, face pale, lips trembling. "It's time," she whispered, hands clutching the doorway. Everything stopped. He dropped the bucket and rushed to her side, catching her as her knees gave. He carried her to the bed, voice calm but heart thundering like a war drum. She gritted her teeth through the first wave of pain. "Don't coddle me," she snapped between breaths. "Just stay." He stayed. Through hours that stretched into darkness. The wind howled, the fire dimmed, but he didn't leave her side. He wiped her brow, held her hand as she screamed, whispered words he hadn't spoken in years. By dawn, the cabin echoed with the fragile cry of new life. A girl. Tiny. Red-faced. Furious with the world already. Clara held her with reverence, tears spilling freely. Jeremiah stood at the foot of the bed, hands trembling, mouth parted in awe. He'd seen death take. But now he saw life return. "She's yours," Clara whispered. "No," he said. "She's ours." For a long time neither moved. The wind had quieted. Outside, the sky was soft with morning, and the pine trees stood like sentinels. They named her Hope. Spring unfurled slowly, bringing green to the hills and warmth to the cabin. Clara walked the land again, the child wrapped in cotton against her chest. Jeremiah built a cradle by hand, each notch and groove carved with care. He shaped it from pine, the same tree that shaded Eliza's grave, and set it near the hearth. Sometimes, Clara caught him sitting beside it long after the baby had fallen asleep. Watching. Listening. They were a family now. Built not from blood, but from choice. From survival. But the West was not done testing them. One evening, as the sky burned orange and gold, a rider came. Alone. Dust clung to his coat, a rifle slung low across his back. Jeremiah watched him from the edge of the field, heart tensing. The man rode up slow, his eyes sweeping the land. "You Cain?" he asked. Jeremiah nodded, one hand brushing against the knife at his belt. "There's trouble comin'. Big trouble. Bandits, ones that been burnin' farms down east. Taking whatever they want. Word is they're headin' this way." Jeremiah stiffened. "How many?" "More than 10. Maybe more than 20. I came from Blair Ridge, nothing left there but smoke and bones." The rider didn't stay. He delivered the warning and rode west, a shadow swallowed by the dusk. Jeremiah returned to the cabin with heavy steps. Clara met him at the porch. "What did he say?" "He didn't lie. He never had. They're coming. Maybe soon." She held hope tighter, her jaw hard. "Then we don't run. We fight." He didn't argue. But that night, he sharpened every blade, checked every bullet, reinforced every window. Clara prepared food that could last weeks. They dug a trench behind the barn. Hid supplies in the well. Each day, the wind carried more dust. Each night, the sky seemed lower, the stars dimmer. When they came, it was just before dawn. Jeremiah heard the horses first, thundering like a stampede. He slipped from the bed, boots already on, rifle ready. Clara tucked Hope into the cradle and kissed her forehead, then took her place behind the hidden panel in the root cellar. "You don't come out," he whispered, "unless the fire's out and the cabin's quiet. I won't let you die alone. You won't let her grow up alone either." A moment. A breath. Then the door shut. He took position near the window. Watched as the riders crested the hill, 12, maybe more. Faces wrapped in cloth, guns drawn, eyes hungry. They surrounded the cabin like wolves. One called out, "You in there, Cain? We heard you got yourself a new bride. Maybe a baby too." Jeremiah didn't answer. "We ain't here to kill. We just want what's fair. A bit of food. A warm bed." The girl. Still silence. "Last chance." Jeremiah stepped out, rifle raised. "You want what's mine?" he shouted. "Come take it." The standoff cracked like thunder. Gunfire erupted. The cabin's wall splintered as bullets tore through. Jeremiah ducked, fired back. One man fell. Then another. But there were too many. He retreated to the door, breath ragged, shoulder bleeding. He didn't see Clara slip up from the cellar. Didn't hear her step behind him until she passed him another rifle. "You're bleeding. I'll live." "Then keep shooting." They fought side by side, back to back. Clara's aim was clean, measured. She didn't flinch. Jeremiah felt pride swell in his chest even as blood soaked his shirt. But then fire. The barn caught first. Then the fence. The flames leapt hungrily, smoke curling into the sky. "We have to fall back," Clara shouted. "They're trying to burn us out." Jeremiah nodded. "Take Hope. Go to the ridge. I'll cover you." She didn't argue. She grabbed the child, wrapped her in a blanket, and slipped out the back door into the trees. Jeremiah stayed. Firing. Holding. Minutes passed like hours. Then, a cry. Not Clara. One of the bandits. And then, a whistle. Shrill. Echoing. The sounds of hoofs thundered from the east. Jeremiah turned to see a figure on horseback, tall, wrapped in furs, face painted with war colors. It was the stranger he'd once shared a fire with in the forest. A Comanche warrior. The same man who had given Jeremiah directions months ago when his wagon broke an axle. Now, he rode with 6 others, silent shadows of vengeance. They descended like wrath. Arrows flew. The bandits panicked, scattered. The gunfire ceased. When the dust settled, only smoke remained. The warrior dismounted. Jeremiah, bloodied, stood tall. "You followed?" he asked. The warrior nodded once. "You kept your word. You respected our land. Now I return it." He vanished into the trees before Jeremiah could thank him. Clara returned minutes later, Hope safe and asleep in her arms. They stood in the ashes of what was lost, and what had been saved. The cabin was scarred. The barn gone. But they were alive. Together. That night, as the stars returned, Jeremiah held his daughter in his arms. Clara leaned against his side. "I never thought I'd have this," he said. She smiled. "Neither did I." He looked to the sky. "You think it'll ever be easy?" "No," she said. "But I think it'll be worth it." He nodded. And for the first time in years he believed it. Their family wasn't born from peace, but from battle, from survival, from choosing each other again and again. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. Certainly. Here's section 4 of the screenplay narrative, with exactly 1,200 words, continuing directly from the previous section and staying focused on character development, central conflict, and narrative immersion. The months after the attack passed with a hush that felt both sacred and tense. The land had been scarred, burned fences, blackened timbers, tools lost to smoke, but Clara and Jeremiah rebuilt quietly, deliberately. He chopped new lumber with hands that still bore scars, and she planted herbs behind the cabin, her steps cautious with the baby always in a sling across her chest. The nights were still haunted. Hope would cry at the sound of a wolf's howl, and Clara sometimes sat up in bed, eyes open and blank, heart hammering from dreams she couldn't voice. But they were alive, and the land, though charred, was still theirs. Jeremiah kept watch longer these days. A rifle always stood by the front door. Every rider on the horizon made his heart skip, but none came with malice. Traders passed now and then, some refugees too, families displaced by the same raiders who'd come for them. Jeremiah shared what little food they could spare. He didn't ask questions. He just listened. The world beyond their ridge was changing. The law was slow to reach this far west. Men made their own rules. Clara noticed how Jeremiah had grown quieter again. Not distant, just heavy. He held Hope with awe still, sang her lullabies in the low rasp of someone who wasn't used to singing. But Clara saw the shadows under his eyes, how he paused sometimes mid-task, staring into nothing. One evening, as the sun was bleeding behind the pines, Clara found him sitting on Eliza's grave. He didn't turn as she approached. Just sat still, elbows on his knees, hat between his hands. "She would have liked you," he said after a long silence. Clara knelt beside him, saying nothing. "She was soft," he continued. "Gentle. Not like you. You're iron. But she'd have seen your heart. Would have been proud of the way you fight for what's yours." Clara stared ahead. "I'm not proud of the things I've done to survive." "You should be," he said. "We don't choose our fire. We only choose how we walk through it." She glanced at him. "And how are you walking through it now?" Jeremiah's voice cracked. "Some days I think I'm still standing in it." He let the tears fall then, quiet, shuddering. Clara didn't speak. She just leaned her shoulder into his and let the grief pass like a storm over the plains. In the weeks that followed, Jeremiah started carving again. It had been years since his hands had taken to wood for anything other than tools or repair. But now he worked slow, steady, chiseling a small rocking horse, then a cradle fit for a toddler. The pain in his shoulders didn't stop him. Clara would sit nearby, patching worn shirts, humming soft lullabies while Hope napped. Then came the letter. It arrived tucked into the satchel of a trader from the north. No name on the envelope, just Cane, ridge-lined cabin. Jeremiah opened it beneath the tree where he'd once watched snow fall alone. Inside, the ink had bled some, but the words were sharp enough to cut. Asterisk, your brother is dead. Found hanged. Debt unpaid. They're coming for what's his. Including you. Asterisk. Jeremiah folded the letter slowly and stared into the horizon. He hadn't spoken of his brother much. Clara only knew fragments: how they'd parted over land, how debts had poisoned whatever remained of their bond. Now the past had a new face, and it was riding toward them. He told Clara that night. She didn't panic. Her voice didn't rise. But her hands trembled as she cradled Hope tighter. "Will they come here?" He nodded. "If they believe I'm liable for his debt, they'll ride to claim what they think is theirs. We've barely rebuilt," she whispered. "I won't let them take it again." In the days that followed, Jeremiah rode to the nearby settlements. He spoke with ranchers and homesteaders, men who'd once fought with him against bandits, against winter, against wild. Some agreed to watch the ridge, to send warning if trouble came. Clara cleaned the shotgun. She wasn't the woman from the auction anymore. She wasn't bruised or frightened or small. She stood beside her husband, equal in defiance, daughter at her hip. The rider came one dusk, alone at first. He wore a black coat and a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. Behind him, in the tree line, more horses shifted. Jeremiah stepped down from the porch, rifle in hand. Clara stood just inside the doorway, watching. "You're Cain?" the man asked. "I am. You're holding property that belonged to your brother. And debts don't die with men, just pass down like land. I don't owe you anything." Wrong answer. More riders emerged, 6, maybe 8. Jeremiah raised the rifle, eyes cold. "I buried my brother with nothing but dust. You want more from me, you'll have to take it from the barrel of this gun." The standoff stretched. Then a voice rang from the trees. "He ain't alone." The Comanche warrior stepped from the brush, bow in hand, 2 scouts beside him. The same warrior who had come during the first raid. Silent. Watching. An ally made not by oath, but by action. The men on horseback hesitated. The warrior spoke one sentence, low and guttural. Jeremiah didn't know the words, but their weight shook the leaves. The rider in black spat, cursed, but turned. One by one, the others followed, fading into the night. When it was over, Jeremiah let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Clara stepped into the light. "How do you know he'd come?" "I didn't," Jeremiah said. "But I hoped." The Comanche warrior didn't linger. He met Jeremiah's gaze once more, nodded, then vanished into the woods like smoke. Later that night, as Hope babbled and kicked in her blanket, Clara and Jeremiah sat by the fire. "I've been thinking," he said, voice thick. "When I bought you, I didn't know I was buying back a reason to live." Clara looked at him, tears in her eyes. "You didn't buy me," she said. "You saved me. And then you gave me the space to save myself." Jeremiah leaned in, brushing her knuckles. "Would you marry me properly? Not because you had to. Because you want to." Clara laughed, then cried. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." They married beneath the tree where Jeremiah had once carved Eliza's name. Now he added Clara's beside it, and below both, one word, hope. That summer, the garden bloomed fiercely. Bees returned. The air was sweet with wild flowers. Hope took her first steps between her parents' outstretched hands. The land, once scorched and bloodied, had healed. But the past was never truly gone. It lingered in quiet corners, in scars and dreams. And yet, when storms rose on the horizon, Jeremiah no longer faced them alone. He had found not just a wife, not just a child, but a reason to keep going. A family forged in hardship. And that kind of love, born in the fire, never truly died.